Hello and welcome to the latest developer diary. So there have been a bunch of updates and want to be diving in and showing you a couple of the things that are happening there with this. So I've got things set up, immediately can kind of see there's a bunch of objects in that being spawned in the background. So if I go over here and we can take a look. So one of the things that you're going to be doing in the game is collecting objects along the way. And there's going to be different sizes and types of objects. So not all of the objects are in yet. There's about 30 different objects that I need to build. But there's a few ones already in there. These are obviously placeholder ones that are blocked out but not yet textured. So there's going to be some small objects, some medium objects, and some large objects. And the density of those and what particular things get spawned, that's actually something that we've got quite a bit of control over. So in terms of the stuff that actually is getting spawned, if we go and look at the individual biomes, so each biome has configuration on it for the different types of objects that are able to be spawned, so the various small, medium, large ones. I also can, for these, control the weighting. So that's something where there's going to be a fairly heavy weighting of small objects, a lower weighting of medium, and then a lower again of large. There's going to be, I've got controls over sort of the ranges, so I can see I don't want stuff spawning so that the train is clipping through it, and I want stuff spawning sort of in this closer range. So it's a fairly narrow range that it's spawning in. But I've got stuff, that general weighting I can be controlling. I've got height limits, so I can configure additional ones here. So if I wanted some small objects, to have a different weighting versus others, that's a matter of just creating another entry there, which makes it really simple for placing that. And then there's actually just one global control for the amount of objects to spawn. Now, at the moment, I've just got that wired up as a specific number, but that's actually something that what I'll be able to do is vary that. So as you progress, I can increase that so you have progressively more resources accessible to you, but I can also have areas where there can be essentially a time-limited event accessible where it's doing stuff where it's going to, okay, it might massively increase the amount of resources. So you've got a real chance to try and you want to be able to be collecting as many as possible. But it's also could have something where there is a massive drought of resources. So you're then having to try and survive really lean times with very minimal resources. So that's some key stuff that's going to be able to be doing there. And each biome is going to be able to have different weightings there. So be able to have, a biome might be sparser than another. So that's going to let me do some really useful things there, which is going to be great. The other big stuff that's been added in, if I go to the main train carriage, is the trains have a lot of stuff in them now for what they show is going to be based upon the upgrades. And so that was quite a challenging thing because a train carriage, if we take a look at the structure of it, so it's the one train carriage, one prefab, but underneath that, we have different meshes, and for each particular type of car, there are different types of meshes that might need to be present depending upon the upgrade level. There are some meshes that are common, so additional things there that are accessible for any of the particular carriages. So that's quite complex because we've got meshes, we've got collision, there's bits of UI and everything. So I needed to make it that what ones get shown are based upon the upgrades that are present. So at the moment, I've got all upgrades present. But if I, with that, then if I spawn another carriage, and I'm going to start the train just moving ever so slightly. So this is, showing fully upgraded ones. But if what I wanted to instead do was, okay, I want to get rid of all of these upgrades. So say I get rid of all of them. Then now when I go and spawn a carriage, it's going to be the lowest, most basic tier of it. It's not going to have any upgrades on it whatsoever. So we can see sort of what those very basic versions look like. So whatever upgrades I install will control what stuff gets added there. So if I just go and add in and I want to say, yep, I want to give everything lightning rods, and then now when I spawn one in, I have lightning rods. So this is something that makes it really easy, but how this actually works is a little bit of an involved setup. So if I actually go to the prefab for our sort of train, so we have our carriage prefab here, and what we can see is it has this component map. And the component map, you'll notice it lists these paths, and these paths, if I open that prefab, these paths correspond to the entries here under things like meshes and collision and UI. So it can see, has this path name, and then it has stuff there for the linked mesh, the collision, the UI. Now this is a lot of data. We can see there are 33 entries in the component map. And some of them get quite complicated because there are things like the guardrails. Well, the guardrails is one unlock, but guardrails aren't built into the upper carriage, which means the upper guardrails need to be able to be unlocked. So you'll see stuff here where things like the guardrails, if we track down where the railing upper is, that actually has visibility rules. So the guardrail upper can be visible F. We have level 4, and we have the guardrails 1, so it's checking that all of those are present. So we have different criteria that it can use for the visibility rules. So this is the thing that makes it really powerful for me, being able to say, okay, has an initial filter of, yep, this only belongs on particular behaviors. So that means like the main engine carriage doesn't support guardrails. It's already got them baked in. So it would fail the supported behaviors test and not try and add them. But for any of these other ones, it's going to check the different levels. That also means in some cases, there might be things where we need to suppress stuff. So like stairs are present if we've got any of the level 4 ones, because they add in the upper floor. But no stairs, well, its visibility rules are, it's only visible if these upgrades are absent. So we can control what stuff is visible based upon things being present or based upon things being absent. So that just makes it a really easy way of me ensuring the visibility setup. And this information is able to be populated. So I didn't set up all of these entries here manually. A lot of the visibility rules, supported behaviors I had to do manually, but the rest of the stuff I was able to just actually do rebuild carriage data, and it populated all of those entries in there for me, because there's so many entries and it made it easier to link it up. Now that's something where at the moment it can't patch the existing data. So what I would probably do going forward, because this is a technique I think I'll definitely be using again in other things. So going forward with this, what I want to actually be doing is looking at making it so that it can patch the existing data and be able to pull out some of the stuff like the supported behaviors and all, just to make it that this map can be easily built up. Because how it uses that map is actually then really quite simple. It's not much logic that it needs for it. Because what it does has the logic for checking if things have matched. So there's comparison logic there. We have wrapping stuff for the entries in that list. But then how it actually determines it is it goes through, it looks for and checks, okay, well, what ones are actually going to be visible. So we've got the rebuild data entry there, but in terms of then determining if they're visible, it does this synchronize. Which what synchronize is going to do is checks the behaviors. So if the supported behaviors don't match, then nothing is going to be visible. If they do match, then it's going to go and check. So it just gets back this one key thing saying if something's going to be visible or not, and then it goes and updates the collision, updates the mesh, updates the UI based upon that, if it's got them. So it provides a really simple way of being able to pull out that data and get everything up and running for it. So that's working really effectively. So then over to the object placement, because this is an interesting one. So similar to what I've done with the modifier structure for a lot of things, if we look at the setup there with the biomes, has placement rules, there's some noise and everything being used. What that's doing is quite straightforward. So the configuration comes from the biome. So the biome itself has the actual configuration, the idea being that there's a lot of common information there that even if I set up a different type of object placer, I'd still want these core things. I might add to it, but these are the essential things that I want. So the simple object placer just goes through for each entry. So for each one of the, if we go to the actual biomes, then for each one of the entries in the list here, goes through, it builds up a list of candidate locations to use. So firstly, it wipes out any existing candidate ones. It's going through, checking the limits. If they match, adds it into the candidates. Then it works out how many to spawn. It's got some safety checks there for if we're trying to spawn more things than we've got candidates. That will be handled. When it goes and actually spawns something, it flags that vertex as used. So because different configs there, one vertex might be valid for one thing but not for another, we want to actually be clearing which ones are being used. And we can actually see when it's building up that list of candidate ones, it goes and checks that. So it means we won't go and, even though we're building up separate lists and randomly picking, it means we can't go and pick the same one twice. That's something where that vertices used, you'll also notice vertices used gets passed into this, and that's intentional. If we go down, if I have multiple object places, they know what things have already been used. So that allows me to, if I wanted to, I'm not doing it currently, but if I wanted to, I could actually have multiple object places here, and they would not intersect with each other. Now, there is an assumption that's being made here that all of the objects are of a size where they're not going to clip into each other. That's an assumption that I am making at the moment. That's a rule that I can enforce. That's something that is completely fine for this. That's something that wouldn't necessarily apply in other scenarios, but in this scenario, that works. So it's using noise. So my general approach that I find works well for placing things is I generate some Perlin noise, and then I check if that noise is above a particular threshold, then it means it is a viable candidate, and then I randomly pick from those candidate ones. So that gives me both it being random, but also still some clustering happening. And I find that that tends to look quite good. Now, at the moment, I am spawning quite a lot of things. So there is quite a lot of stuff being spawned at the moment, but it's working quite nicely. I'm quite happy with how those are looking. Performance-wise, the performance is still sitting pretty solid. So the render to texture I have got turned off at the moment because that is definitely one that is probably the most, I guess, sort of risky from a performance point of view. And that's one that I'm still not sure if I'm going to be able to have that in there. But if I bring in a bunch of the carriages, so we'll go up to 15 of the different ones. So we've got obviously the visual effects. I've been continuing to do bits of tuning on the visual effects, and I'm quite happy with how those engine particles look. And I like that they're a little bit sort of visible through there, which is great. As I said, the spawning of the objects I'm pretty happy with. And it is possible, because one of the things I want people to be able to do is get up onto the top of here. Oh, I managed to actually get into the collision. That's one I'll probably need to tweak, but you can hop up on the top here and just watch as the lighting is changing. We've got all of the objects spawning in, and the performance is still managing to be pretty solid, given that this is in editor. It's not using release versions of the scripts, and haven't really done too much in the way of optimization pass at this point. And there's definitely going to be a lot of things I'll be able to adjust optimization wise for it. But for the moment, it's running pretty nicely. So really the next sort of steps is, so this scrap is going to be able to be collected. And these siphon carriages here are going to be the ones that are doing the collection. So that's something where what's going to start being able to happen is scrap here will be getting pulled into these collection carriages. And what size of scrap is able to be collected is going to be based upon the upgrades that are installed. So there's small, medium, and large collectors. So small collectors are obviously only going to be able to collect small stuff. Medium, be able to collect anything, but we'll prioritize medium. Large, same, be able to collect anything, but we'll prioritize large. So that's going to be next focus, is getting that collection happening. Along with that, a bunch of key bits with the user interface. So with the user interface there, having it that in each carriage, getting a stats display happening. So we can see, okay, here's where we're currently at in terms of what stuff have we collected. We've collected X numbers of old boots, this number of tables. Here's the total amount of scrap we've currently got. Because the individual bits of scrap, if we look at them, they have a weight associated with them. So that weight is essentially their value. More weight means more scrap, means more stuff that you can be spending on upgrades. So that's going to be the big next sort of focus, is getting those upgrades in, getting that scrap collection happening, and getting really two of the major carriages functional. One is being the siphon, and the other being the storage one. So siphon, can see, has a little bit of storage, but it's primarily, its focus is on siphoning in stuff, whereas then the storage one is going to be able to stack on huge amounts of stuff. So getting those in, getting those upgrades happening, starting to get it, the shop is in there, so you can purchase those upgrades. So all of those are the next bits of focus there. And so I'll be able to be sharing a bunch of those in the next update. Thanks, folks. I hope you found the update interesting. If you have, chuck in a like and subscribe. There's going to be many more coming. If you've got questions, chuck in a comment below. I don't have any code to share for this one, but hopefully in some of the future ones, there'll be some more bits of code that I'll be sharing. I definitely want to be doing that. It's a matter of there being bits of code that I think are going to be useful ones to share. And at the moment, there's not really any ones that I think are good ones to be chucking in for sharing, but in future, definitely. But yeah, if you've got questions, chuck in a comment below. But until next time, bye.